Welcome to Episode 4 of John Q. Public, Historical Investigations. As we continue on into our story of the Cumberland County, Pennsylvania Militia, beginning in 1777 during their service in the American Revolution until 1782. Please, if you would, subscribe and hit like or dislike, and leave me a comment. It will only help me to get better. As always, I will provide details of my reference materials in the description box of this YouTube video. We'll begin this story with introducing you to Alexander Peebles, born 1740 and passing in 1821. Alexander Peebles was of Scots-Irish descent and is first recorded living in Hopewell Township, Cumberland County, colony of Pennsylvania as early as 1766. Alexander was married to Mary Weir. Alexander had 6 children, 4 girls, Mary, Sarah, Anne, Elizabeth, 2 boys, Robert and Alexander. The family were members of the Middle Spring Presbyterian Church, located in Shippensburg, Pennsylvania. Alexander managed a farm of some 300 acres, which included livestock. He was also a blacksmith. Considering the time period, one would have to hand-forge building supplies and handmade tools. Through viewing numerous tax records and other historical documents, Alexander is not recorded as ever having any servants, and taking this into account and the size of his farm and family, one can easily surmise he must have been a very busy and industrious man. Today, 250 years later, his limestone home and a summer kitchen still stand, surrounded by productive, pristine farmland. Subsequent families have expanded the farming operations with additional outbuildings as well as a large bank barn. This homestead is located in Southampton Township, formerly part of Hopewell Township, at 107 Kramer Road, Shippensburg, Pennsylvania. The property is currently believed to be owned by the Beistel Company. With the urgent need of soldiers to fight in the already ongoing War of Independence from the King of England, the new state of Pennsylvania issued the 7 March 1777 Pennsylvania Militia Act, making service in the Pennsylvania Militia mandatory for all men ages 18 to 53. Call-outs of service were to be 2 months in length and could occur on multiple occasions. Soldiers were initially issued a blanket and accoutrements. Weapons and ammunition were not always readily available. In May of 1777, Alexander Peebles is commissioned as a captain of the men of Hopewell Township, Cumberland County, Pennsylvania Militia. Alexander serves under another notable man of Hopewell Township, Colonel James Dunlap, who is already an experienced veteran of the War for Independence, an attorney, a blacksmith, and the future founder of Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. Records indicate that Alexander was called for service twice this year, July and October of 1777, which would place him in the efforts for the defense of Philadelphia. As previously discussed in Episode 3, 300 men of the Cumberland County Militia under Colonel Dunlap reported to General Washington at Chester, Pennsylvania on 29 August 1777 and were placed under the operational control of Brigadier General James Potter of the 1st Pennsylvania for the defense of Philadelphia against England's advancing army of English and Hessian soldiers led by Lord Cornwallis and General Howe in a series of battles called the Pennsylvania Campaign. The men of Cumberland County are present at the Battle of Brandywine on 11 September 1777, and on 16 September 1777 engaged the British cavalry at the Battle of the Clouds, also known as the Battle of White Horse Tavern. On 4 October 1777, they engage in combat with the Hessian army at the Battle of Germantown, and on 17 November are present for further action as Brigadier General Potter's pickets on the Derby Road at the Bluebell. Alexander is further recorded in another call for service to Sunbury, Pennsylvania, providing assistance to Fort Augusta in September of 1779 during a very turbulent time in Northumberland County, Pennsylvania's history, with multiple raids and massacres occurring on local residents by British Rangers, British Loyalists, and allied Iroquois tribes near Wyoming, Pennsylvania, Turbotville, Pennsylvania, Fort Freeland, McKnight's Farm, to name a few. These times in Pennsylvania history are often referred to as the Big and Little Runaway. The Big Runaway was a mass evacuation in June and July 1778 of settlers from the frontier areas of north-central Pennsylvania during the American Revolutionary War. A major campaign by Loyalists and Native Americans allied with the British devastated the small communities on the northern and western branches of the Susquehanna River, prompting local militia leaders to order the evacuation. Most of the settlers relocated to Fort Augusta at modern-day Sunbury at the confluence of the north and west branches of the Susquehanna River, while their abandoned houses and farms were all burnt. Some settlers returned soon after, but the attacks were renewed the following year in 1779, leading to a second evacuation known as the Little Runaway. As a side note, through my research of the Cumberland County Militia, you will often find Peebles spelled three different ways. Peebles, P-E-E-B-L-E-S, Peoples, P-E-O-P-L-E-S, and Pebbles, P-E-B-L-E-S. Subsequently, I found three historical documents that refer to this militia callout for Captain Alexander Peoples in September 1779 to Sunbury, along with 3 officers and 15 enlisted. I found no documents telling me why they were being sent or what their mission was. After conducting my research into the possibilities of the why and what, I contacted 2 of my closest friends, Mike Zarrett, a professional cameraman, freelance journalist, and owner of Bloomsburg Town Camera, and Bill Dixon, an anthropology major and a former archaeological technician, who was on the archaeological dig in preparation for the mid to late 1990s Pennsylvania Route 11 and 15 widening project, which runs parallel to the Susquehanna River from approximately Harrisburg to Sunbury, PA. We began our investigation at the Northumberland County Historical Society in Sunbury, Pennsylvania, located at the exact site of Fort Augusta. We found the volunteers of the Northumberland County Historical Society to be very helpful and friendly. COVID restrictions were still in effect. What did we discover and what did we see? Sunbury, Pennsylvania, Fort Augusta. Fort Augusta was Pennsylvania's stronghold in the upper Susquehanna Valley from the days of the French-Indian War to the close of the American Revolution. This site, now within the limits of the city of Sunbury, is in an area which the Native Americans called Shamokin. First constructed as part of the British defense against the raids of the French and Indians from the upper Allegheny region. It was later used as an American fortress to aid in the protection of the settlers of the upper Susquehanna from the Indian allies of Britain during our War of Independence. Several important wilderness travelways met near Fort Augusta. The river and its branches made canoe travel easy to the north, west, and south. From the headquarters of the West Branch near Emporium, there was a portage of only 20 miles to the headwaters of the Allegheny River near Port Allegheny or Canoe Place. A network of trails led in all directions. The Shamokin Trail, the Iroquois Warriors Trail, and the Kittatinning Trail were all alternate routes by which destruction might come upon the Pennsylvania frontier settlements. Fort Augusta was in a key position for both defense and attack. During the American Revolutionary War, Fort Augusta was the military headquarters of the American forces in the upper Susquehanna Valley. The activities of Northumberland County Militia, the sending of troops to serve Washington's army, and the support of protection of smaller posts throughout the valley were all directed from this fort, where Colonel Samuel Hunter, the county lieutenant of Northumberland County, and the administration of its militia resided. It is well noted from Colonel Hunter, due to the many letters he authored to the powers that be, that the requirements of the war on the men of Northumberland County had depleted its ability to protect itself from incursions of the British Rangers, light infantry, loyalist, and allied native raiders. There were many incidents of these raids, but we are going to pick 2 that were large, climatic, and impactful, causing the Big Runaway in 1778 and in 1779, the Little Runaway. Wyoming, Pennsylvania, the Big Runaway. We drove to Wyoming, Pennsylvania to the site of the Wyoming massacre, and where there is presently a memorial erected to memorialize the events that occurred here. We were not able to utilize our drone due to the close proximity of the Wilkes-Barre, Wyoming Valley Airport. The following is a description of events. While there are many different written accounts of these events, I am providing this one as a basic summary. This location geographically at the time in history is complicated, as this part of Pennsylvania was contested prior to the War of Independence with the colony of Connecticut. I am referring to the Pennamite Wars between the two states. The Massacre of Wyoming. It was about 4 p.m. on July 3rd of 1778 when one of the bloodiest battles of the Revolutionary War took place in the Wyoming Valley of Pennsylvania. The fighting is said to have lasted no more than 45 minutes to an hour. 340 patriots were killed during the Battle of Wyoming. The British, along with colonists that were loyal to the Crown, and over 500 Seneca tribal members, led by Colonel John Butler, marched into Wyoming Valley on June 30th. They were demanding that the Patriots surrender the forts that were manned by the militias. In exchange, they would be allowed to live as long as they did not pick up arms against Britain again. The alliance of the Loyalists and the Senecas produced a force of well over 1,000 to go up against approximately 400 to 500 Revolutionary fighters. This battle has often been referred to as the Wyoming Massacre due to the overwhelming numbers of the Loyalists and their allies, and of the many records that indicate that many of the militia were tortured and scalped. Colonel John Butler claimed in his journal that 227 Patriot scalps were taken during this bloody battle. Colonel Zebulon Butler, who was on leave as an officer of the Continental Army, would be first in command of the small army of militiamen that were trying to hold the valley. His second in command was Colonel Nathan Dennison. Both men were to be among the few who survived the Battle of Wyoming. They were only 174 of the Patriots known to be alive after the short but fierce fighting came to an end. Many were missing and presumed drowned when retreating into a swamp area. While filming at this location, I was approached by a local man who appeared to be finishing up some kind of construction. In our conversation, he asked me if I knew of the Bloody Rock and Queen Esther. He explained to me located a few blocks away from where we were standing is a place that after the battle, a native woman whose son had been killed in a battle prior to this event was allowed to revenge her son by bashing in the skulls of the captured patriots on a rock with a maul, most likely a warhammer. He further explained at the location of the rock is a memorial, and the rock has been protected due to people chipping off pieces of the rock as a souvenir. While I have not discovered this man's exact account of events as described, I did discover the location and an account of the event. Fort Freeland, the Little Runaway. We then drove to Turbottville, Pennsylvania to the site of the memorial of McKnight's Farm and Fort Freeland. We were able to utilize our drone at this site. The following is a description of events. While there are many different written accounts of these events, I am providing this one as a basic summary. After some time passed post the Wyoming Massacre, the settlers began to gradually return. Settler Jacob Freeland decided to fortify his home and mills with a stockade for protection in prevention of future Indian raids. Fort Freeland, as it became known, sat on Warrior Run Creek in Northumberland County, 4 miles east of the present-day Watsontown. In the spring of 1779, the Indian raids began again, and several families moved into Fort Freeland. The vast majority of fighting-age men, however, had gone off to fight in the Continental Army. On the evening of July 28, 1779, a large force consisting of 300 Seneca under Chief Hiokatu and 100 British soldiers arrived. Approximately 80 people were in the fort, mostly women, children, and old men. Only about 20 were capable of using a gun. On the morning of July 29th, a battle began. The settlers fought valiantly until their ammunition ran out. The women even contributing by melting down all the pewter in the fort for musket balls. Eventually, the inhabitants had to surrender. Non-combatants were allowed to go peacefully, but those of fighting age were taken captive by Chief Hyokatu, known for his bloodlust, killed all the wounded. Fort Freeland was plundered, and the victors settled down along the creek to enjoy a meal. Just then, Captain Hawkins Boone, possibly a cousin of Daniel Boone, arrived with 30 militiamen. Boone had set off to relieve Fort Freeland after hearing of the arrival of the Indians, but he was too late. Boone, upon realizing that a number of settlers had been killed, was furious and ordered his men to fire directly into the resting enemy troops. Several dozen were shot and killed. The Indians and British immediately fired back, and Boone and half his company were killed while the rest fled. After the Battle of Fort Freeland, the Indians continued in terrorizing the area, and most of the remaining settlers left again, not to return until the end of the war. It is believed the ultimate goal of the British and Indians was Fort Augusta in Sunbury to the south. The fort was lightly guarded, but it contained a large amount of supplies and food for the upcoming Sullivan expedition, which George Washington organized to retaliate against the Iroquois campaign. For whatever reason, the Indians and the British did not go much further south than Fort Freeland and called off an attack on Fort Augusta. Their losses at Fort Freeland may have been the reason sparing the supplies of the Sullivan expedition, which devastated Iroquois territory permanently. In closing, it's easy to see the need and circumstances behind the why and the call out for Captain Alexander Peoples in September of 1779 to Sunbury, along with 3 officers and 15 enlisted. I believe it is further conceivable that the mission of these Pennsylvania militia members was to provide some stability to the region by either providing force to protect people and or supplies. As indicated in this record dated 10 September 1779 to the Board of War overseen by Joseph Reed, addressing Colonel Hunter, commander of the Northumberland County Fort Augusta, and Colonel Carruthers of the Cumberland County Militia, they were in desperate need of ammunition. It would indicate that they were low on ammunition and that they were in dire need. There is further information that there were many other counties in Pennsylvania that were also sending what they could during these times. Food supplies and really all resources were at a minimum. Folks supporting the war in the East were worried about their homes and families back on the frontier. Who was protecting them? In the next episode of John Q. Public Historical Investigations, we will look at what we know to date about the Cumberland County Militia of Pennsylvania and their service from 1777 to 1782. Until next time, investigation continues. I want to provide a special thanks to the following: Bill Dixon, anthropology major and archaeological technician; Mike Zarrett of Bloomsburg Town Camera; Stokes Piercy, professor of film, ETSU; the Conakajig Institute of Mercersburg, Pennsylvania. Thank you for letting me steal some of their living history photographs; Northumberland County Historical Society, Sunbury, PA; and the Jacobsburg Historical Society of Nazareth, Pennsylvania. Thank you.